Morning and welcome to our first webinar of 2026 as part of our Exchange webinar series. As we approach the May 1 start date for the Maine's Paid Family and Medical Leave Program, we want to ensure that both our members and the broader business community fully understand the program's details, application process, and how your employees may be utilizing the benefits. I'm Curtis Picard, President and CEO of the Retail Association of Maine. Pleased to be co-hosting this morning's webinar with the Maine Grocers and Food Producers Association, along with our partners at Hospitality Maine and the Maine Tourism Association. We're grateful to have experts from the Maine Department of Labor with us today who will bring deep knowledge of the law and the program. Christine?
Morning. Thanks, Curtis. Hi, everyone. My name is Christine Cummings. I am the Executive Director of the Maine Grocers and Food Producers Association. This morning, we are pleased to be co-hosting this webinar and bring you the latest information on Maine's Paid Family and Medical Leave Program. As we near May 1st, it is imperative that employers stay engaged, ask questions, and ensure clarity where it's needed. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to our co-host, Nate Cloutier.
Good morning, everybody. On behalf of Hospitality Maine and Maine Tourism Association, thank you for taking the time to join us. We know how busy you all are getting ready for this next season that we're going into. We appreciate you taking the time for stepping away from your businesses so that you can be part of this conversation. We're looking forward to walking through what's coming with the Department of Labor, what it means for your operations, and where there's still questions, we'll get you answers. So thank you again for being here.
Great. We would like to take a moment to recognize today's series sponsors who have invested in and supported the work of the Retail Association of Maine and the Maine Grocers and Food Producers Association. So a sincere thank you to Poland Spring, Shaw Supermarket, Associated Grocers of New England, Altria, Bizzuto's, CNS Wholesale Grocers, Coca-Cola Beverages Northeast, Hannaford Supermarket, HP Hood, and Pepsi. We truly appreciate your continued support. And a few procedural notes before we begin, just a few housekeeping items. All attendees are muted and you will remain muted throughout the webinar. We will hold a question and answer period at the conclusion of the presentation. To ask a question at any point, move your cursor to the bottom of your screen. In the toolbar, you'll see a white Q&A icon. And if you can't see the Q&A icon, you may need to access it by the three dots on the far right of the toolbar. Click on the Q&A box and type your question in the box and click send. This webinar is being recorded and will be available afterward for those who would like to revisit this information. And we certainly recognize there may be a fair amount of questions, so we'll do our best to get through them all. If not, we'll keep an eye on the clock and see we may go over slightly, or Reggie and Luke have graciously offered to ensure that your questions are answered afterwards. So thank you all, and I'll turn it back over to Curtis.
Great. We are pleased to welcome two very knowledgeable speakers this morning. First is Reginald Parson, Deputy Director of the Maine's Paid Family and Medical Leave Program. In this role, Reggie has helped lead the implementation of the state's paid leave law, ensuring eligible workers have access to up to 12 weeks of paid leave for family or medical reasons. With more than a decade of experience in public administration, he has managed complex public programs and contributed to policy development across a range of issue areas, including corrections and health and human services. Prior to his current role, Reggie served as legislative staff for the Maine House Majority Office and for two former House Speakers. He's a graduate of the University of Maine School of Law and the University of Wisconsin, Oshkosh. Joining Reggie is Luke Monahan, a director of the Paid Family and Medical Leave Program. He was born in Western Maine and is the son of a small business owner. He attended Bowdoin College and then Northeastern University for graduate studies. He started his career with case management nonprofits in Southern Maine in case management roles. With the state of Maine, he brings more than 14 years of program administration experience and has previously served as the Associate Director for the Division of Disability Determination Services with the DHHS, an office tasked with making medical determinations for the Social Security Disability Insurance Program. Luke joined the Department of Labor in January of 2024 to oversee the full implementation and administration of the Paid Family and Medical Leave Program. Please join me in welcoming Reggie and Luke.
Well, thank you. Really, thank you for those wonderful introductions and happy to be here. And also, as Curtis said, on the call is Luke Monahan, who's the director of the program. I'm Reggie Parson, the deputy director, and also I just see now Sophia Khalid, who's joined us. She's also our PFML outreach and policy specialist, so she's working with us very closely on many other webinars and the other outreach events. As the introductions were given, I was reflecting on the last time I was here, which was some time ago, and at that time it was talking about the PFML program in kind of a more broad general aspect. But since that time, things have evolved pretty rapidly. And so what I'm here today, and Luke and the team is here for, is to kind of really now talk about the benefits phase of the program, which is coming very soon. So with that all being said, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and basically give a PowerPoint presentation, and obviously towards the end, try to address any questions that you might have. And go ahead and get started. So generally, in a nutshell, this is what's going to be covered today in terms of the presentation. So it's going to be an overview of who's covered under the law, what reasons people can take the program for, and then obviously how much time an individual has on paid family and medical leave. And then I'm going to get a little bit into AFLAC, which would be our third-party administrator for the public plan, and kind of talk a little bit about the application process. And then, lastly, any tips or best practice or recommendations. Okay. So in a nutshell, who's going to be able to take paid family and medical leave starting soon? So the law pretty much covers a broad swath of workers and employers across the state. And so, assuming that the workers meet the eligibility requirements, they'll be eligible to take paid family and medical leave. So obviously they must meet some form of an earnings requirement that the law has established. They need to be out for one of the covered reasons that the law allows it for. And then they need to provide documentation for that, which we'll get a little bit into later on what type of documentation, depending on the leave. And then finally, how much leave time someone can use. But I want to also talk a little bit about folks who can elect coverage. So their participation is optional under the program. And those are tribal governments and self-employed individuals. And then finally, there are some exceptions about who can participate under the law. Some of it is spelled out in statute, and some of it has been clarified in our regulations. So, for example, if employees or the federal government as an employer, they're not required to participate in paid family medical leave. But in our regulations, we clarified other types of employment that would not be eligible, including those wages. And those are individuals who may be receiving federal work study or incarcerated workers either in a county jail or in a Maine state prison. Those types of employment and wages are not considered eligible for paid family medical leave. So how much time can someone be approved for? So I think folks pretty much know in a nutshell that the law provides up to 12 weeks of paid family and medical leave in a benefit year. And if folks have questions about what a benefit year is, we can definitely try to answer them. But a couple of things about the leave time in a nutshell is that it doesn't have to be all taken at once. Obviously, someone has that option to take it continuously if they need to. But you can also take it intermittently. So someone, for example, could be taking blocks of time off to go to medical appointments or to take a family member to medical appointments, and then still be working at the same time. The one thing we also want to continue to address and clarify as we're getting more questions about how does the paid family and medical leave program interact with any of the federal or state unpaid leave laws. So our law and our regulations do state that any used FMLA time that someone has taken in the prior 12 months has to run concurrent with PFML, so it will reduce potentially their leave time in that benefit year. But again, definitely happy to answer any questions specific about that. So, what are the reasons that people can take PFML for? So, you can take it for either bonding, and that is to either bond with a new child through birth, adoption, or fostering or foster care. But workers can take time off to care for a family member that might have a serious health condition. And a serious health condition has been defined in our regulations in our statute, or individuals could take it for military family leave. And this applies to situations where you might have a worker who has a family member that is currently in the military, and that family member gets deployment orders, or in some cases, if the individual is on active duty, they develop a serious health condition, or in the really unfortunate event, they die while on active duty. So that's the military family leave part of the program. But workers can also take PFML to care for their own serious health condition that prevents them from working. And then finally, for safe leave, this applies to either the worker or the worker's family member that might need to seek safety if they are unfortunately navigating through some abuse or violence. So to talk a little bit about, again, AFLAC. So AFLAC, for workers and employers that are participating in the public plan, they're going to be the claims administrator. And so obviously we have been working closely with them to get the launch of benefits going, which again will be coming very soon. But in a nutshell, when looking either for the AFLAC portal when it goes live, or any resources regarding claims or benefits or what employers might have questions for, please visit maine.gov/paid leave. So when benefits do go live, we will have a button available, most likely on the workers portion of the webpage, in order for them to access the portal. But there are some things before we go live that both employers will need to do, and both workers need to do. So for employers, we have been getting questions about the template employee notices that are required under statute that needs to be given to workers. We have both a template form for employers that are in the public plan and employers that are in the private plan. We also recently translated those employee notices in 7 different languages other than English. So you can find those template forms on the employer portion of our PFML webpage under the employer resources tab. And once you hit it, there'll be a drop down for employers to see it. But when it comes to what employees need to do in terms of giving notice, I'm going to spend a little bit of time kind of digging a little bit into the weeds of the notice piece. So in a nutshell, workers do have to give their employers, if they know in advance that they're going to need to take leave, at least 30 days. And so our regulation says clarify that is reasonable. But in some cases, the undue hardship provision might apply if 30 days isn't necessarily enough time for that employer to know of their worker's intent to take leave. And I'll talk about undue hardship just in a moment. But in situations where life happens, the worker has no idea that something may be arising. And in those cases where an emergency might happen, the worker does need to give their employer notice as soon as it's feasible. And in some cases where, unfortunately, if the worker is incapacitated, they might have gotten into a horrible car accident or some medical event that prevents them from communicating with their employer, a family member can provide that notice, that emergency notice, on behalf of their family member. And one other thing to note about the notice piece, that it needs to be done in writing. So whenever the worker is intending to take leave or needs to provide notice to the employer to take leave, it needs to be done in some form of written notice. And kind of getting back to what undue hardship is, because I just brought it up. So essentially, in cases, this is where the employer's voice comes into the process. So an employer can raise an undue hardship if that worker taking leave causes some disruption in the operations of the business. And so there will be a process in those situations where the worker and the employee can't craft the leave schedule that works best for everybody. And also just want to clarify what undue hardship is and is not. So it basically comes down to a scheduling issue. And so we believe the intent of the law, and we've tried to clarify it, is that it promotes a conversation between the worker and the employer, again, to try to find a leave schedule that works best for everyone. And I can, if folks have questions towards the end about what the process looks like if there is no agreement, we can definitely take some time to answer that. So kind of getting into the steps on the application process, trying to figure out what is eligibility and so forth. So the first step is, again, workers do have to meet a certain earnings requirement in order to be eligible for paid family medical leave. And so folks have probably heard the term 6 times the state average weekly wage for our program. And so for 2025, the state average weekly wage is $1,198. The thing that may change on a yearly basis is that state average weekly wage. So that affects the earnings that a worker has to earn during that base period. And so what a base period is the first 4 of the last 5 completed calendar quarters. So we're looking out basically over the span of a year in terms of whether that worker has met that earnings requirement. They do not have to earn that $7,188 with one specific job. Workers, obviously, as we know, sometimes change jobs throughout the year. And so we'll be looking at the quarterly wage data that has been reported about that worker from all of the employers that they have worked for in that time frame. Okay. So the second step is kind of once we get past whether they've met the earnings requirement, now AFLAC will assess whether they're attempting to take the leave for one of the reasons that the law sets out. So if it's a bonding application, for example, there will need to be documentation of proof of birth of that child or paperwork showing that, the child has been adopted or there's a foster care placement happening. If it's caring for a family member, certification forms do have to be completed by a healthcare provider showing that, yes, this family member does have a serious health condition and needs care as a result of that. If it's military family leave, it's going to be documentation that the military hopefully has provided to that service member, and that in turn the worker can demonstrate that, yes, I have a service member and who's either going to be deployed soon or one of the situations that I just discussed has taken place. For medical leave, this is where the worker will have to, again, go to the healthcare provider and have that healthcare provider fill out documentation showing that they do have a serious health condition that's preventing them from working. And then for safe leave, an attestation form will have to be completed showing that the worker or the worker's family member is experiencing some unsafe situation. And then lastly, this is where numbers and math kind of come into play, is now we need to calculate what the benefit amount is. I do have another slide that really gets into the weeds on how this 2-tier wage replacement will happen. But in a nutshell, PFML is meant to be a partial wage replacement program. So that's why it's also important for employers to, submit their quarterly wage reports timely, because that will also affect not only whether the worker has met the 6 times the state average weekly wage, but then it also affects the benefit amount that someone could be potentially receive while on paid family and medical leave. It is a 2-tiered wage replacement formula. Again, I have another slide that gets into the weeds on it. But another thing I want to also highlight is that the worker's weekly benefit amount that they receive on paid leave is capped at the state average weekly wage. So the statute really dictates this situation. So now we're going to get into the weeds on math. I'm going to take a little bit of time to talk about all of these numbers, and people are seeing 50% of the state average weekly wage and 66% and 90% wage replacement. So I'll start with the example of a worker who, after we look at their wage data and their base period earnings show that they earned $15,600. So if we divide that specific number by 52 weeks, their individual weekly wage is about $300 a week. So under a tier one wage replacement formula that the statute has set out, their earnings are going to be replaced at 90%. If those earnings are 50% of the state average weekly wage. So you see in the column where it says tier one, doing that 90% calculation, they're going to be earning $270 a week on paid family and medical leave. But if someone has earned around $57,000 during that base period, we divide their wages again by 52 weeks. We look at the tier one wage replacement, which again, if the state average weekly wage is really going to affect what the tier one benefit will be. But in this scenario, they're going to be earning $539 a week while on paid family medical leave. But because they have earned more than 50% of the state average weekly wage, we also have to factor that in. And the tier two wage replacement calculates those earnings at 66%. So that last column you see of the weekly benefit amount is essentially combining the tier one and tier two wage replacement together. And that's the individual's weekly benefit amount estimated while on paid leave. And then finally, we just wanted to highlight again what the maximum weekly benefit amount will look like. So in this scenario, the base period earnings about $90,000 a year. Again, divided by 52 weeks is about $1,700. Tier one wage replacement, they're going to be earning about $539 a week. But the 66% wage replacement, those earnings about $746. So because again, the statute says it's capped at the state average weekly wage, they'll only be earning $1,198 and not the $1,200 that you see here. So now we're kind of moving into if workers have questions about their claim, or if maybe they've received communications from AFLAC regarding their claim, there will be a AFLAC employee portal that will be available 24/7 after go live, or they can give the call center a call as well if they have questions. So if individuals want to apply for the program, and again, any communications from AFLAC, they will be able to access their portal and then try to address what those questions or concerns that might have come from AFLAC. And then if employers have questions, so with this one, we've been able to interface some of the current uses with the Maine Paid Leave portal that employers are also participating in. We've been able to interface some of the AFLAC portion of what employers might need to do. So for example, if you get communication from AFLAC, needing more information about the employee's claim, and actually, this is also an opportunity for employers to be notified that their worker has filed for a claim, because the statute again requires employers to be notified that one of their workers has applied for paid family and medical leave. So there will be an employer-facing portal that can be used through AFLAC, but it can be navigated through the Maine Paid Leave Contributions portal. And then finally, if folks have questions, obviously we're going to address them here, but we do have an abundance of resources on our webpage. So maine.gov/paid leave. It is a refreshed website, and we've launched that, I think, probably a couple of maybe two or 3 weeks ago at this point. But the information is more segmented. So if you are an employer and you just need information specific to you as an employer, there's a button for that. And if you're a worker, you're looking for worker-focused stuff, there's a button for that. Or if you're self-employed, we also have a button. So there's a way to just obtain the information that you need. We've updated our explainer videos to account for the benefits portion. And that's where our FAQs are also available. And then if you haven't also signed up for the interested parties list, I would certainly encourage you to do so. We use that as a communications channel pretty frequently to announce updates about the program, or if we've updated our FAQs and all the things about paid family and medical leave. So with that, that concludes my portion, and I'll stop sharing my screen and see if there are any questions. I know there's probably quite a few.
Thank you for all of that, Reggie. I know
Yeah.
as someone who's frequented that website often, you guys have done a great job reorganizing and ensuring that as much information as there is to share and clarify that it's out there for folks. So
Thank you.
thank you for that.
Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, a reminder, you all can use the Q&A function on the bottom toolbar, and we'll go ahead and open it up for discussion. I do know there was a question posed in the chat. So it was specifically that if an employee goes out on FMLA in April and is expected to be out until July, can they apply for paid benefits through the state in May, or does it only cover employees who are going out on leave after May 1st? And so Luke has since clarified that they can apply for a portion of leave after the May 1st to be paid, and it is reduced by unpaid leave taken prior to 5/1. So just in case others were wondering about a similar scenario.
Reggie, Luke, we have a lot of seasonal employers in Maine. The obligations for seasonal employers operating 120 days out of the year, same as other employers. Can you just cover that bit again for us?
Yeah, so for the seasonal piece, and I know there, and I think you're referencing the job protection piece, like if you work for an employer for 120 consecutive days, is that part of it, Nate? Just want to make sure.
Maybe you could take that as two separate pieces. One, just generally, what do season employers, the obligations are the same for seasonal employers as general employers, and then maybe the job protection piece.
Okay, yeah. So for the seasonal employers, yes. So if you do have workers that you're paying a wage to, which we've defined in our regulations that are similar to the unemployment law, then the 0.5% deduction from those employees need to be taken, or the employer can voluntarily choose to pick up the employee's deduction if they wish. So employers are required to, submit wage reports on a quarterly basis. If you have workers during that time frame, and I know for the seasonal business, it can be a little bit kind of different because it could also change what your premium obligations are. So but seasonal businesses are affected by the program. But knowing that, again, depending on the time of the year, you might not have workers, or you might have workers, but either way, the law will apply. And in terms of the job protection piece, so under the law, if a worker has worked for an employer for at least 120 consecutive days, they are entitled to job protections under the law, which includes any employer benefits that might have been given to that employee or something equivalent to what they had prior to taking leave. And that is all required by statute.
There was I just saw a couple questions in the chat. I wanted to speak to the fraud one. I know that's a hot topic. So there are unique aspects of Maine's law that I think is going to help us with the fraud concerns. The primary one, as Reggie covered, is that our claims administration is actually being done by an insurance company, Aflac, and so they have robust fraud protection measures in place. The other, I think, piece that is unique to Maine is the undue hardship employer verification piece of the law. So when somebody applies, an employer will get notice of the application and a chance to put in information within that 10-day period before a claim is processed. That is unique to Maine. Not every state does that. A lot of states, you just have the employee bringing the employer forms over. So I think that's going to be a major boost to Maine's program. In terms of identity verification, that's absolutely going to be part of the process. And AFLAC has robust measures. Obviously we don't broadcast all of those because we don't want to play into what bad actors could play against. But we are going to be tracking fraud data. The penalty for fraud, there are criminal penalties, obviously, if it's a certain threshold. They can be charged for theft by deception, theft by unauthorized taking. The programmatic administrative penalty is a year suspension from the program, and that's by statute.
And I am seeing now, we can take it, Luke and I can tag team on the Q&A questions that are bubbling up. So on one of the questions I see is the 12-week benefit, is it the annual benefit? So I think this might getting to what is a benefit year. So the benefit year is defined in statute as the Sunday before the day you actually take your leave and concludes 52 weeks later. So, and in terms of, I think, again, and it also runs into whether that worker has used any unpaid FMLA time in the prior year. But it is defined on a benefit year basis. And I see the clarifying the 1 day of hours. Yeah, so essentially I'm assuming this gets into intermittent leave. But our regulations do clarify that it has to be taken for at least a minimum of 1 hour in order to be eligible. I know that for seasonal businesses, it might be a little bit kind of tricky or tenuous, but is the employer consulted on the math? So that kind of gets to the notification piece. So when a worker either has applied for leave, has been approved, I think has been denied, or is requesting reconsideration, the employer will also get a notification kind of spelling out, whether it's an intermittent leave claim, obviously what the reason that they're taking leave for, that will help the employer kind of navigate through any scheduling issues that they might see if it is an intermittent leave situation. But if that doesn't address your question, definitely feel free to add it again into the Q&A. So let me see. I see. So seasonal employees can only take after working over 120 days. No. So the way that the law was written, the 120 days only applies to the job protection piece. So there might be, and the law has clarified this, that there's no specific time frame that a worker has to work for that employer in order to be eligible. So there could be a day one situation where they work for you, something happens, they need to apply, they're able to apply. Now, whether they're eligible, that's a different situation. But we're only looking at in terms of the 120 days, whether they have worked for you for 120 consecutive days for job protections, not applying for leave. They could apply on day one. Make sure I'm not missing it. Okay. How are notifications sent to businesses? Can you sign up for email notifications? Luke, I don't know if you want to take this one. I can too.
Yeah, no, I can take it. So you can designate and you should designate, and we're actually calling businesses right now. We've sent up a couple portal messages, but within the FAST portal, the employer portal, you can designate your clean contact email. And I'm going to check for the how-to guide in a second and drop it in the chat. But we're recommending that all employers put in that email address now, and that will be the email address that you'll get notification that you have a claim in the employer portal that you can go in and check out. And the information, this came up in another question, that an employer can see in the employer portal for AFLAC is the person taking leave, the leave type, the leave duration, and the weekly benefit amount as well is going to be accessible to the employer in real time.
Luke, just to clarify, are you saying that if employers have several different EINs, there will be one email that a notification will be sent to, or is it by EIN?
So it's how they register in the FAST system. So if they have separate registrations by their FEINs, they can designate separate email addresses. It's one claims contact per registration. And a lot of businesses are registering by their FEINs. So you could certainly have it be the same contact across your FEINs if you want. But you can have one claim contact per portal registration.
let's see. So I see one question that says, does an employee get only one 12-week benefit once used, no additional benefit in subsequent years? So the law doesn't have like a lifetime like limit. If you use it once, you can never use it again. The law is only looking at whether that worker has used the 12 weeks in a benefit year. So you might have workers who never use, the program, during at any point, or they might need it. So if they do use the program and they happen to use up all of their 12 weeks in a benefit year, the clock essentially resets in terms of that 12-week. Again, assuming that they haven't used, if they've used any unpaid FMLA time, it does draw down their weekly benefit amount for the benefit year. But yeah, there's no lifetime cap, essentially.
I'll help you out here with organizing some of these. If an employee provides less than 30 days notice in a non-emergency situation, will the benefits be denied, or is it up to the employer to claim the late notice created an undue hardship?
Wait, sorry, can you repeat that again? I know this is for the emergency notices.
I think the premise of the question is, what will the standard be for proving undue hardship?
Oh, okay, yeah. So, and this is where the regulations come in. So obviously it's every business is going to be different. And so we can't, or there's no set standard on what constitutes an undue hardship. So for example, depending on if it's a retail business, obviously it might be hitting peak, we're talking about Black Friday, for example. But that might constitute an undue hardship, but it's all based on the context of what the employer is navigating through. Does it cause a disruption in the operations of the employer, and only the employer will know that, obviously, because they're closest to the staff and to the issues that they're trying to navigate through. And so in emergency situations, and obviously life does happen, but in those situations we'll obviously take into account. And I don't know if undue hardship for the emergency notices, that's something I don't know if we might need.
No, if it's an emergency need for leave, there is no undue hardship requirement.
Yeah. Right. Okay. But on the undue hardship piece, it will be based on what the context of the employer's needs are in the operations.
Thank you. Can you just briefly cover what a safety leave situation is again, and when that would be applicable?
Yeah. So, what safety leave or safe leave means is that if an employee or the employee's family member might be undergoing some form of domestic violence at home, they might need to take some time off to, go seek kind of emergency services related to that domestic violence situation. They might need to, for example, maybe take some time off if they need to, maybe do some financial arrangements in order to get away from, the situation that they're in. It will vary on what that will look like. So yeah, that's what will constitute kind of some situations that will involve safe leave.
We have somebody wondering if they can sign up for the employer portal today. Would you be able to drop that into the chat?
Well, so I didn't know if they're talking about the FAST portal. Yeah, you can sign up for the FAST portal anytime. We're going to be, when I talk about the AFLAC employer portal, we're going to have a single sign-on mechanism. So you will access, as an employer, the AFLAC benefit portal for employers through your FAST account. That will open up the AFLAC benefit portal for both employees and employers. Will open up when pre-applications start, and we're going to be announcing that date soon. We anticipate April. And so as of that time, employers can go into their FAST account and single sign on over to the AFLAC portal. We want to make it as easy as possible so you're not managing two separate accounts. If you're not signed up for the FAST portal, yes, you can do so today at maine.gov/paid leave. If you need assistance, we have our call center number right on the website. They can walk you through the process.
Since there's differences between federal FMLA and state paid family medical leave that isn't recognized as federal FMLA, and there needs another leave that's recognized as federal, do we need to offer an additional 12 weeks of leave to be compliant with the federal law?
So, excuse me, I'm getting over sickness, so my voice is a little crackly. But so the employer should be running any time that is FMLA eligible concurrently with PFML. We recognize there will be cases that are PFML eligible and not FML eligible, and vice versa. There'll be cases that are FMLA eligible and not PFML eligible. So the clocks will never arrange completely, but really for the employers, just to make sure that if somebody has an FMLA qualifying event, they're running the time, whether that's with PFML or not. And then AFLAC will use any previous time used to offset the PFML benefit if there was, to prevent, stacking by the employee to get a 24-week period.
I have a seasonal business owner asking for clarification. So a staff member must work at the business for 120 consecutive days before job protection applies, and do those 120 consecutive days reset each season?
So for seasonal businesses, the law or our regulations doesn't address that specific issue, but I guess it also depends on the context of, do you anticipate or will you anticipate having that employee kind of back on the payroll? So it will kind of vary for seasonal businesses, but at least for what the law says, they have to be there for 120 consecutive days before the job protections apply.
Because we have a lot of workers that are on H-2B or J-1 visas. They're
Right.
here for, they'll hit that 120-day mark and then be back, leave sometime around October, November, and then be back around April. So that clock would still be technically ticking.
Well, I guess in that, okay, now that's more a little bit more specific. So in that case, but again, it also depends on if that worker's in. So essentially, yeah, it will reset essentially. Because I'm just thinking of the situation where does the employer envision that worker coming back? And I know it's an H-2B situation, so they might not come back to that employer. But yeah, if they hit that 120-day mark, but if they never apply for the leave, then the clock does reset. Yeah.
Another question about undue hardship. If a claim does cause undue hardship to the business, what does that mean? And what changes relative to the employee and how they're able to take paid leave, and what changes relative to the employer?
So now to kind of get into the weeds on what undue hardship is, at least for the public plan. So it comes down to a scheduling issue. So the law does not deny a worker's right to take leave. Obviously, if they're eligible, they do have the right. It comes down to a scheduling issue. And so if there is still a disagreement, the worker and the employer can't work it out, this is where AFLAC will come in as the administrator. So this is why it's also important for the employer to, within that 10-day mark, provide information on why that undue hardship exists. And the potential outcomes could vary. So if, for example, the administrator, after taking into account all the information, says that, yes, an undue hardship existed, it was considered reasonable, then the worker has to take the leave based on the employer's proposed leave schedule. If the administrator finds an undue hardship did not exist, then the worker can take their leave based on the schedule that they crafted, or when they applied that time frame. So those are the potential outcomes, but it's not basically a veto. It doesn't mean that, the worker can never take leave. It's just, it needs to be done in a time frame that works best for the worker and the employer if an undue hardship exists.
So are you saying that it'll essentially be the role of the administrator to determine, set consistent standards based on what's qualifies as an undue hardship?
Well, and I guess in terms of consistent standards, it will again come down to the context of the business. So obviously, we're talking about seasonal businesses. The needs are going to be obviously different, but we will be obviously working closely with AFLAC because this is going to be a new concept, and that is the thing I think we all need to be honest about. This is going to be something that we're going to be learning as an agency, kind of how this is taking shape, because this is a conversation between workers and employers. And then we're also going to be working with AFLAC to see kind of how these decisions are coming out. Now, I will also say there is a right to an appeal. If that employer says, nope, I do not agree with Aflac, they can apply, they can appeal that decision, and the worker can do the same. But it will be a learning lesson, I think, for all of us.
I did want to hit on two
Chris.
quick things since you mentioned Aflac. So my understanding is Aflac is, I mean, I think most people know who Aflac is, but they do provide this type of service to a number of other states as well. So I think it's important for people to know that you're working with an experienced provider. I think it was good that the state chose Aflac since they have this experience. But can you also touch base a little bit on the financial stability of the program? Because I think that was encouraging to hear that the actuarial study came out, and it looks like, there's going to be funding there for, I forget how many years, maybe up to 10 years.
Yeah, 10 year. Yeah.
Yeah, I can speak to that one. Yeah, so the first actuarial, well, so there was an actuarial study before the program started, just as they were designing the program, that was projecting what the premium rate should be for the first couple of years at least. We conducted our first actuarial study of actual data, actual revenue data, this past year through a national vendor, and we were also very encouraged by the findings. The trust fund has brought in, at this point, I think $230 million in the first year, and it is projected to be solvent for at least the next 10 years, based on actuarial projections of claims data and revenue, and that will be adjusted every year. We have the actuaries required by statute to do a new actuarial study every year. And those studies will help inform us if the premium rate needs to go up, or our hope based on the promising financial data downwards is the hope.
Just so people are aware, we did share in the chat the link you had posted, Luke, as well, for adding a claim contact. So that should be there for people to click through. I think there was just one more question that popped up. What makes Aflac an authority on undue hardship? Do they manage the specific area for other states?
So Maine, excuse me again, my voice. So Maine is the only PFML state in the country that has an undue hardship provision. So there is nobody in the country that has this experience. We are literally creating a new system from whole cloth. Aflac is a national leader in leave policies. And they are also the only vendor that has specifically experience running a PFML program for another state. They run the administration of PFML in Connecticut. So when Maine decided to privatize that piece of the state plan with the claims administration, we went out to bid, and Aflac was a strong vendor and won the contract based on their experience in the private sector, but also their very direct experience in running a PFML program for a state program in Connecticut.
Yeah, and if I can add on to that, kind of getting back to the appeals process. So Aflac is not necessarily the final word on these matters. If a worker or an employer feels that the undue hardship determination, they disagree with it, then that can be appealed. And in that case, the department will go through the normal appeals process. So there is another layer of review if an employer or worker disagrees.
Someone posted, with this new benefit, can you clarify if an employer tells employees about this benefit, post the notices, etc., do they have any further obligation to the employee to direct them to this leave, or is it just up to the employees to request the leave on their own with Aflac as they do now with private coverage?
Yeah, so the statute will really guide kind of what the employers and workers' obligations are. So we do have in our statute section 850I that outlines somewhat explicitly what the employer's obligations are. And so it'll be up to the worker. I mean, obviously the worker will know kind of closest to what their needs are. And so if they do apply, they will have to apply through the Aflac portal. And then in that situation, that will kind of trigger the notice requirements that need to be given to employers. So for example, Aflac will notify you, hey, one of your workers has applied for leave. And then as the process goes on, and that's where, again, the undue hardship provision will come in, and if there needs to be communication about that. But the employer will also be notified if they've been approved, the worker been approved, denied, or has requested reconsideration. So yeah, but the worker will know if they need to apply for leave or not.
Question just popped up. Do we hand them a notice when they start or get it to them another way?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So employers have been asking about this. As long as we don't necessarily govern the method in the sense in terms of how you provide those employee notices. Obviously, with the labor poster, it has to be posted in places where other labor posters are, so it is a little bit prescriptive. But we've had employers ask questions. Well, can I do it electronically through my HR system? Can I embed it in my HR handbook? Yes, you can. We don't govern that. But as long as it shows that the employee has seen the notice and has signed it, that's where we will kind of pay attention to that. Will say, okay, the worker has been given the notice.
I will add as well, I haven't looked at the revamped website recently. I know you said you've changed it quite a bit in the last couple of weeks, but
Yeah.
for everybody on the webinar, I have found the FAQs very helpful, and I know you guys have been regularly updating that over the last year. So a lot of questions that you're typically getting are answered in the FAQ as well. So if you're not remembering the answers today, if Reggie and Luke have answered them, definitely go to the website. There is a lot of information on there that employers and employees would find very helpful.
Yeah.
I think with that, we're at a good point now. So why don't we wrap up today's presentation? A sincere thank you again to Reggie and Luke for sharing their expertise with us this morning. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. We encourage you to reach out to any of us with follow-up questions. And as I said, visit the Maine Department of Labor's Paid Family and Medical Leave website for more information. And stay tuned for upcoming exchange webinars on Maine's EPR for Packaging program and a legislative session recap once the legislature wraps up, and hopefully no more than 3 or 4 weeks. But we appreciate your time and engagement. Thank you, and enjoy your rest of the day.